What's going on, guys? Kyle from Video Game 306 here. So I'm just sitting on the floor in my living room with my old friend, the NES. And I was trying to play Adventure Island, and I'm just getting a blinking green screen. And I'm pretty upset because I want to play Adventure Island, and I can't. So, for every door that closes, another one opens. This is a perfect opportunity for a repair video. I'm going to show you guys some, I guess, unique ways to fix the NES, and I've pretty much had a 100% success rate with these methods. So here's my Adventure Island 2 test cart. This thing works flawlessly every time. We're going to pop her in there, turn it on, and that's what happens. So one thing I'm going to go over is the pins on the NES. I can tell right away that this NES probably wasn't going to work because when you put the game in, it just goes all the way in with no effort. The pins, they don't actually bite down on the circuit board itself. So we know it's not making a good connection right off the bat. On the table here is a brand new set of 72 pins. Well, it's a brand new 72 pin connector. And when you put a game in a new connector, it's actually hard to get in there. And that connector won't come off because it's a nice tight fit. Those pins that we're looking at, they have to fit very tightly around that card right there. Otherwise, your game won't make a good connection and things just won't work properly. Another very, very important step is to clean the actual contacts on the game itself. If those are dirty, nothing will work. Take your Q-tip, dip it in rubbing alcohol, get on top of it, on top of the contacts, on the bottom of the contacts. Give it a really, really good scrub. Once you're done, they should look very shiny. It's like a brand new shiny copper kind of look. I won't be able to pick that up on the video here, but you get the idea. Very important, nothing will work if your game's dirty. So the first thing we do, bring the NES to the workbench and remove the 6 Phillips screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I got all the screws loosened. I'm just gonna separate the top from the bottom. Once you have your lid off, well, before you have your lid off, you'll notice it gets really dirty in those slots. The color of everything is just kind of gross looking. It's 35 years old, so understandable. What I like to do is take this lid to the kitchen. Turn on a light in here. Throw it in the sink. Turn on the tap. Just give that lid a really good spray down. Throw some soap on there or whatever, but it gets all that dirt out of those cracks. I mean, there's nothing in there that can go wrong. There's no electronics. So just let that air dry and then we'll continue on elsewhere. There's the other half of the NES. This is your little heat shield or whatever you want to call it. We have 9 more screws to remove, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So remove all those screws, remove this piece of metal, and then we'll continue on. Alright, so I got all the screws removed. This piece just pops right off. This is your fancy tray that Nintendo decided to include for whatever reason. Alright, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more screws to remove. These 2 silver screws are longer screws and they have to go in that same spot. I got that one removed already. But yeah, remember where those silver screws go because they are longer and it's the only 2 longer screws in this whole system. Alright, so we got all the screws out. Now we just wiggle this tray loose and put that aside. So now we have the main circuit board, and this is a 72 pin connector that causes all the problems. But that's not the only thing that causes problems. There's one other thing that we can do. First things first, we're going to lift out the circuit board and we're going to undo those two connections and then this connection here on the front. So 1, 2, 3. Now that we have the circuit board removed from the housing, take your time, do a nice job, clean out your housing. If you see anything in it, take it out, blow all the dust out. Always do your best work, guys. Alright, there's the circuit board. Right underneath you have another little heat shield or IO shield, whatever you want to call it. Put that aside. Next step is to remove these pins here. The pins just pull straight off the circuit board, just like that. And there you go. There's the old pins. Put that aside for now. The next step is to clean these silver pins with rubbing alcohol. So get my Q-tip and just give it a really good scrub. Both sides of the board. I'm not even scrubbing very hard, and even though they look clean, you can see how dirty they actually are. So I'm just going to finish that and then we'll get back to the video. The next step, guys, is to disable the lockout chip. That is this chip right here that's behind these capacitors or resistors, whatever they are. Anyways, I believe this chip was put on the circuit board to stop companies from creating unlicensed Nintendo games. But apparently if you had an official Nintendo game and your chip actually got dirty, this chip could kick in because it doesn't recognize that Nintendo game and actually stop your system from playing a dirty official Nintendo game. So that being said, we're just going to go ahead and disable this to prevent any future problems. Do this at your own risk. I have heard after you disable this, some of your games won't work. I've never had that issue myself, but do your own research and do that at your own risk. To disable this chip, if you look where my screwdriver is, it's the fourth pin. 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically I'm going to get my screwdriver behind there and I'm going to pry that pin off of the chip, and basically we're just going to separate the contact from the chip to the motherboard. I'm going to do this without my camera phone because it's kind of a delicate procedure, but I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. There we go. It's kind of dark in here, but I'm trying to get this to focus. As you can see, that little pin is now separated from that chip. So it's the fourth pin. You just get your screwdriver behind there and pry it off. You don't need to remove the pin from the board. You just need it separated from this black chip itself. Now that alone might fix your problems, but we're going to go a step further. So one of the main problems is that these pins get dirty. But if you remember what I showed you before, when you plug in your game, it should be a nice tight fit in those pins. That is not a tight fit. It came off super easy. So we're going to fix that, but we're also going to clean this first. So how do you clean it? Let me show you. You grab an old toothbrush, you dip it in some rubbing alcohol, you put it in those pins, and you just scrub the hell out of it. Once you're done that, this is where it gets weird. Alright, now while you guys weren't looking, I went into the kitchen again. A lot of this involves the kitchen. And I started boiling some water. Now we ain't cooking KD here. We're cooking 72 pin connectors. Drop that in the boiling water. No, I'm not kidding. Keep it in there for a whole 10 minutes. Once that 10 minutes is up, pull that 72 pin connector out throw it on the cutting board, let it cool down for a second, scrub those pins again with a toothbrush, pick up that connector, put it in for another 10 minutes. I'm not going to show you guys this because I'm trying to keep this video as short as possible, but boil it for that 20 minutes, scrub it halfway, and we'll see you guys in a bit. So this is going to be the part that's really hard to show on camera. I'm going to have to find the best lighting, which is probably going to be the kitchen floor. So, every time you push your game in and out of those pins as a kid, after doing it 1,000 times, these pins here, they've separated. So they were tight before, now they got loose and they stayed loose. So what you have to do is rebend those pins so they sit tight again. So I'm going to try to get a good visual here on how to do this. If you can see, I got my screwdriver placed under the one pin, and that pin is a little bit higher than all the other pins. That's because I put my screwdriver under that pin and I pried it upwards. So that pin is sitting higher than that pin. So that has now closed the gap and has made that 72 pin connector work like a brand new one again. So you do that to every single one of these pins along the whole connector. Now you do this after you've boiled it for 10 minutes, you've scrubbed it, you've reboiled it again, scrub it again, and then bend all those pins in the upward position until they look like that gap is closed. See how you can kind of see that honey container through the pin connector? You just want to close that gap just so that game fits nice and tight in there. Once you're done that, we're going to start putting it all back together. So we've disabled the lockout chip, we've boiled the pins, we've cleaned the pins, we've bent them all back into shape. Let's put all this back together. I'm not going to show you guys this on video. All you have to do is reverse the steps that you did. If you guys have made it this far, I'm confident you guys can finish the job by yourself. So I'll talk to you once I got this all back together. Alright guys, so we got the NES mainly back together. I just put the 2 long screws in to hold this tray in place. So before we finish putting it back together, we're just going to throw Adventure Island 2 in there. And we're going to go give it a test before we get it all put back together, so if something is wrong, we don't need to backtrack and take it all apart again. Alright guys, we got the NES all hooked up, we got the game pushed in there nice and good. I just want to touch on connections here for a second. I prefer to use the component cables. I've had issues with these RF switches before where they just stop working, or it'll only work on channel 3 or 4, and you'll have to, for example, you'll have to use your NES on channel 3, and if you switch it to channel 4 and hook it up, it just won't work. So a lot of the times guys will think it's dirty pins or something when really they just have issues with that RF switch. So we got her all hooked up. We're going to turn her on. And there we go. Works perfect first try. That's what we like to see. I really appreciate you guys watching this video. I hope it helps somebody out. I got one more tip for you here, so stay tuned. So a lot of the times you'll come across a solid green screen even after you've replaced the pins, you've cleaned everything, and you just can't get it to work, so you throw this thing away and you think it's garbage, you think it's a circuit board. Now it can be one of multiple things. You could have like a bad capacitor. The way to usually tell if these are bad, they expand and you can tell this top is actually pushed outwards. But the majority of the time, it's actually an issue with these pins here and a connection to the board. I actually did have an issue with this one. I kind of didn't put it in the video, but I had a piece of solder. I don't know if it came off the board itself or if something got hot, but there was a little piece of solder that was connecting this pin to this pin. So it's kind of creating an arc, and there needs to be a gap between every one of these pins. So I took my screwdriver, and I scraped off that solder, and I scraped that little gap there, and I cleaned that piece of solder out of there, and that got rid of my green screen. So if you are having issues with a green screen, sometimes it can be a bad board, but make sure to visually inspect these pins very carefully and make sure to clean them really good. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. See you later.